Oh, hush, thee my baby, the night is behind us, and black are the waters that sparkled so green. The moon that overcomes looked downward to find us, at rest in the hollows that rustle between. Where billows meet billow, there soft be thy pillow. Ah, weary wee flipperling, curl at thy ease. The storm shall not wake thee, nor shark overtake thee, asleep in the arms of the slow swinging seas. All these things happened several years ago at a place called Nova Scotia or North East Point on the island of St. Paul, away and away in the Bering Sea. Limoshin, the winter wren, told me the tale when he was blown onto the rigging of a steamer going to Japan, and I took him down into my cabin and warmed and fed him for a couple of days till he was fit to fly back to St. Paul again. Limoshin is a very odd little bird, but he knows how to tell the truth. Nobody comes to Nova Scotia except on business, and the only people who have regular business there are the seals. They come in the summer months by hundreds and hundreds of thousands out of the cold grey sea, for Nova Scotia Beach has the finest accommodation for seals of any place in all the world. Seacatch knew that, and every spring would swim from whatever place he happened to be in, would swim like a torpedo boat straight for Nova Scotia, and spent a month fighting with his companions for a good place on the rocks, as close to the sea as possible. Seacatch was 15 years old, a huge grey fur seal with almost a mane on his shoulders, a long, wicked dog teeth. When he heaved himself up on his front flippers, he stood more than 4 feet clear of the ground, and his weight, if anyone had been bold enough to weigh him, was nearly 700 pounds. He was scarred all over with the marks of savage fights, but he was always ready for just one fight more. He would put his head on one side as though he were afraid to look his enemy in the face, then he would shoot it out like lightning, and when the big teeth were firmly fixed on the other seal's neck, the other seal might get away if he could, but Seacatch would not help him. Yet Seacatch never chased a beaten seal, for that was against the rules of the beach. He only wanted room by the sea for his nursery, but as there were 40 or 50,000 other seals hunting for the same thing each spring, the whistling, bellowing, roaring, and blowing on the beach was something frightful. From a little hill called Hutchinson's Hill, you could look over 3.5 miles of ground covered with fighting seals, and the surf was dotted all over with the heads of seals hurrying to land and to begin their share of the fighting. They fought in the breakers, they fought in the sand, they fought on the smooth, worn basalt rocks of the nurseries, for they were just as stupid and unaccommodating as men. Their wives never came to the island until in the late May or early in June, for they did not care to be torn to pieces. And the young 2, 3, and 4-year-old seals who had not begun housekeeping went inland about half a mile through the ranks of the fighters and played about on the sand dunes in droves and legions and rubbed off every single green thing that grew. They were called the Holishchiki, the bachelors. There were perhaps 200,000 or 300,000 of them at Nova Scotia alone. Seacatch had just finished his 45th fight one spring when Matka, his soft, sleek, gentle-eyed wife, came up out of the sea, and he caught her by the scruff of the neck and dumped her down on his reservation, saying gruffly, "Late as usual, where have you been?" It was not the fashion for Seacatch to eat anything during the 4 months he stayed on the beaches, so his temper was generally bad. Matka knew better than to answer back. She looked round and cooed, "How thoughtful of you. You've taken the old place again." "I should think I had," said Seacatch. "Look at me." He was scratched and bleeding in 20 places. One eye was almost blind, and his sides were torn to ribbons. "Oh, you men," Matka said, fanning herself with her hind flipper. "Why can't you be sensible and settle to your places quietly? You look as though you'd been fighting with a killer whale." "I haven't been doing anything but fight since the middle of May. The beach is disgracefully crowded this season. I've met at least 100 seals from Lucannon Beach house hunting. Why can't people just stay where they belong?" "I've often thought we should be much happier if we hauled out at Otter Island instead of this crowded place," said Matka. "Bah! Only the Holishchiki go to Otter Island. If we went there, would we say we were afraid? We must preserve appearances, my dear." Seacatch sunk his head proudly between his fat shoulders and pretended to go to sleep for a few minutes, but all the time he was keeping a sharp lookout for a fight. Now that all the seals and their wives were on the land, you could hear their clamour miles out to sea above the loudest gales. At the lowest counting, there were over 1 million seals on the beach. Old seals, mother seals, tiny babies, and holluschickie fighting, scuffling, bleating, crawling, and playing together, going down to the sea and coming up from it in gangs and regiments, lying over every foot of ground as far as the eye could reach, and skirmishing about in brigades through the fog. It is nearly always foggy at Nova Scotia, except when the sun comes out and makes everything look all pearly and rainbow coloured, just for a little while. Kotick, Matka's baby, was born in the middle of all of that confusion, and he was all head and shoulders with pale watery blue eyes, as tiny seals must be, but there was something about his coat that made his mother look at him very closely. "Sea catch," she said at last, "our baby's going to be white." "Empty clamshells and dry seaweed," snorted Sea Catch. "There never has been such a thing in the world as a white seal." "Well, I can't help that," said Matka. "There's going to be now," and she sang the low, crooning seal song that all mother seals sing to their babies. "You mustn't swim till you're 6 weeks old, or your head will be sunk by your heels, and summer gales and killer whales are bad for baby seals. Are bad for baby seals, dear rat, as bad can be, but splash and grow strong, and you can't be wrong, old child of the open sea." Of course, the little fellow did not understand the words at first. He paddled and scrambled about by his mother's sides, and learned to scuffle out of the way when his father was fighting with another seal. And the two rolled and roared up and down the slippery rocks. Matka used to go out to sea, only to get things to eat, and the baby was fed only once in 2 days, but then he ate all he could and throve upon it. The first thing he did was to crawl inland, and there he met tens of thousands of babies of his own age, and there they played together, like puppies, went to sleep on the clean sand, and then played again. The old people in the nurseries took no notice of them, and the holluschickie kept them on their own grounds, so the babies had a beautiful playtime. When Matka came back from her deep sea fishing, she would go straight to the playground and call as a sheep calls for a lamb, and wait until she heard Kotick bleat. She would then take the straightest of straight lines in his direction, striking out with her fore flippers and knocking the youngsters head over heels left and right. There were always a few hundred mothers hunting for their children through the playgrounds, and the babies were kept lively. But, as Matka told Kotick, so long as you don't lie in the muddy water and get mange or rub the hard sand into a cut or scratch, and as long as you never go swimming where there is a heavy sea, nothing will hurt you here. Little seals can no more swim than little children, but they are unhappy till they learn. The first time that Kotick went down to the sea, a wave carried him out beyond his depth, and his big head sank, and his little hind flippers flew up exactly as his mother had told him in the song, and if the next wave had not thrown him back again, he would have drowned. After that, he learned to lie in a beach pool and let the wash of the waves just cover him and lift him up while he paddled, but he always kept his eye open for big waves that might hurt. He was 2 weeks learning to use his flippers, and all the while he floundered in and out of the water and coughed and grunted and crawled up the beach and took catnaps on the sand, then went back again until at last he found that he truly belonged in the water. Then you can imagine the times that he had with his companions, ducking under the rollers or coming in on top of the comber and landing with a swash and a splutter as the big wave went whirling far up the beach, or standing up on his tail and scratching his head as the old people did, or playing "I'm the king of the castle" on slippery, weedy rocks that just stuck out of the wash. Now and then he would see a thin fin, like a big shark fin, drifting close to the shore, and he knew that was the killer whale, the grampus, who eats young seals when he can get them, and Kotick would head for the beach just like an arrow, and the fin would jig off slowly, as if it were looking for nothing at all. Late in October, the seals began to leave St. Paul's for the deep sea by families and tribes, and there was no more fighting over the nurseries, and the holluschickie played anywhere they liked. "Next year," said Matka to Kotick, "you will be a holluschickie, but this year you must learn how to catch fish." They set out together across the Pacific, and Matka showed Kotick how to sleep on his back with his flippers tucked down by his side and his little nose just out of the water. No cradle is so comfortable as the long, rocking swell of the Pacific. When Kotick felt his skin tingle all over, Matka told him he was learning the feel of the water, and that tingly, prickly feeling meant bad weather was coming, and he must swim hard to get away. "In a little time," she said, "you'll know where to swim to, but just now we'll follow Sea Pig, the porpoise, for he is very wise." A school of porpoises was ducking and tearing through the water, and little Kotick followed them as fast as he could. How do you know where to go? He panted. The leader of the school rolled his white eyes and ducked under. My tail tingles, youngster, he said. That means there's a gale behind me. Come along. When you're south of the sticky water, he meant the equator, and your tail tingles, that means there's a gale in front of you and you must head north. Come along, the water feels bad here. This was one of the very many things that Kotick learned, and he was always learning. Matka taught him to follow the cod and the halibut along the undersea banks and wrench the rockling out of his hole among the weeds, how to skirt the wrecks, lying 100 fathoms below water, and dart like a rifle bullet in at one porthole and out of another as the fishes ran, how to dance on top of the waves when the lightning was racing all over the sky, and wave his flipper politely to the stumpy-tailed albatross and the man-of-war hawk as they went down the wind, how to jump 3 or 4 feet clear of the water like a dolphin, flippers close to the side and tail curved, to leave the flying fish alone because they are all bony, to take the shoulder piece out of a cod at full speed, 10 fathoms deep, and never to stop and look at a boat or a ship, but particularly a rowboat. At the end of the 6 months, what Kotick did not know about deep-sea fishing was not worth the knowing, and all that time he never set a flipper on dry ground. One day, however, as he was lying half asleep in the warm water somewhere off the island of Juan Fernandez, he felt faint and lazy all over, just as human people do when the spring is in their legs, and he remembered the good, firm beaches of Nova Scotia, 7,000 miles away, the games of his companions, the smell of the seaweed, the seal roar, and the fighting. That very minute he turned north, swimming steadily, and as he went, he met scores of his mates, all bound for the same place. And they said, Greeting, Kotick. This year we are all holluschickie, and we can dance the fire dance in the breakers off Lucannon and play on the new grass. But where did you get that coat? Kotick's fur was almost pure white now, and though he felt very proud of it, he only said, Swim, quickly, my bones are aching for the land. And so they all came to the beaches where they had been born and heard their old seal fathers, their fathers, fighting and rolling in the mist. That night, Kotick danced the fire dance with the yearling seals. The sea is full of fire on summer nights, all the way down from Nova Scotia to Lucannon, and each seal loves a wake like burning oil behind him, and a flaming flash when he jumps, and the waves break in great phosphorant streaks and swirls. Then they went inland to the holluschickie grounds, and rolled up and down the new wild wheat, and told stories of what they had done while they had been at sea. They talked about the Pacific as boys would talk about a wood that they had been nutting in, and if one had understood them, he could have gone away and made such a chart of the ocean that never was. The 3 and 4-year-old holluschickie romped down from the Hutchinson's hill, crying, Out of the way, youngsters! The sea is deep, and you don't know all that's in it yet. Wait till you've rounded the horn. Hi, you, yearling, where did you get that white coat? I didn't get it, said Kotish. It grew. And just as he was going to roll the speaker over, a couple of black-haired men with flat red faces came from behind a sand dune, and Kotick, who had never seen a man before, coughed and lowered his head. The holluschickie just bundled off a few yards and sat staring stupidly. The men were no less than Kerrick Boterin, the chief of the seal hunters on the island of Pantalemon, his son. They came from the little village, not half a mile from the sea nurseries, and they were deciding what seals they would like to drive off to the killing pens, for seals were driven just like sheep, and to be turned into sealskin jackets later on. Ho, said Pantalemon, look, there's a white seal.